The reunion was loud. Casserole dishes clattered. Someone brought a Bluetooth speaker and played 80s hits no one asked for. A baby cried every 10 minutes like clockwork. Somewhere in the back, my uncle was already half drunk and talking politics with a teenager who didn't even vote yet. It was chaos, the kind that's supposed to be comforting because it's family, but I've never found noise comforting, especially not that kind of noise. Harper was walking around with the little camera I gave her last Christmas. It was pink plastic and printed blurry Polaroids when it worked. She called it her job. Said she was the event's official photographer, even made name tags for herself and her doll. She was careful with the camera. Thoughtful quiet, which meant she saw things other people didn't. I didn't notice when she went inside. I was helping my cousin slice fruit and fake laughing at someone's story about a toddler sticking crayons in a toaster. But later, Harper came back outside with a photo in her hand, still fresh, still curling from heat. She held it up. I took this one in Mommy's old room. I smiled, distracted, and reached for the picture. What I saw made the skin on my neck prickle. It was dark blurry, but not too blurry. The bed in the photo was mine. From childhood, same rickety frame, still there in the guest room. And on the bed lying down like he belonged, there was my uncle. Eyes closed, one hand behind his head. Shoes off. It was the same pose, the same angle, the same image I had buried 2 decades ago. I froze. The laughter around me dulled. My cousin kept talking, but her voice became background noise. My fingers trembled as I gripped the edge of the Polaroid. "Why is Uncle in my bed?" Harper asked again innocently. Not her bed. Mine. She had remembered whose it was. And suddenly so did I. When I was 8, I had a dream. Or at least, that's what I called it. In the dream, I was in my bed. The one with the faded ballerina sheets and the loose headboard that knocked. If I turned too fast, there was someone else in the room. Sitting on the edge of the bed. Breathing loud. I remember the weight in the mattress, the hush in the air, the way my skin felt too awake under the covers. I told my mother once. She said it must have been a bad dream, that sometimes people feel things in their sleep that aren't real, that my uncle had been downstairs with the others the whole time. And I believed her, because when you're a child, memory and imagination wear the same clothes. And sometimes survival means choosing the softer version. So I filed it away, as nothing, as dream. But now, Harper had captured it. Same room, same pose, same man, and that blurred line between memory and imagination snapped. I sat on the edge of the bathtub that night while Harper brushed her teeth, just like I used to sit in that exact spot at her age, staring at the floor tile pattern, like it might spell out something truer than my own head. Why was he in there, Mommy? I don't know, baby. And I didn't. Not fully, not yet. But something in my chest had shifted. Not panic. Not rage. A slow, cold clarity. Like watching the tide go out and realizing the shore was never as solid as you thought. After I tucked her in, I went back to the living room and took the Polaroid out from my back pocket. Held it under the lamp. Zoomed in. There it was. Same bedspread. Same mole on his left forearm, same shirt he wore to the reunion just hours earlier. There was no denying this one. No dream to blame. Only a question that now screamed in silence. How long had I been trying not to remember? I started with the photos. Old ones. Albums in the hall closet, dusty with the scent of paper and neglect. There he was, Uncle Paul, in every birthday, every picnic, every Christmas Eve. Always near the kids. Always touching someone's shoulder, always with that wide, casual grin that said, "Isn't this funny?" There was one picture I couldn't stop staring at. I must have been 10. He was kneeling behind me, arms around my sides, not hugging, gripping. I was smiling, but it wasn't full, not the kind of smile kids give when they feel safe. And now, looking at it as a mother, it wasn't nothing. I remembered how people used to talk about him. That's just how Paul is. He loves the kids. He's always been a bit much. But no one ever said stop. No one ever moved him away. No one ever asked why he was always there when the kids were alone for too long. At the reunion, when Harper took that photo, he hadn't even noticed. He was too comfortable, too at home in my old room. And that's what haunted me most. It wasn't new, it was routine. I thought about the times he'd tickled me too long as a child, the way I laughed at first because I was supposed to, then twisted away uncomfortable. But he wouldn't stop until someone walked in, and everyone laughed, because kids are so dramatic. Now I was the adult. Now I saw Harper's face when someone touched her hair without asking. Now I noticed how she stiffened when hugs lasted too long. Now I understood what it meant when a child smiled too politely. And I knew one thing. If I stayed silent again, I was no better than the ones who had taught me to forget I called her the next morning. Not because I was ready, but because I knew if I waited any longer, I'd start editing myself again. Start convincing myself that maybe I was overreacting, that maybe I'd misunderstood again. She picked up on the second ring. Everything okay? Do you remember the night Uncle Paul stayed over after Grandma's funeral? A pause, soft but solid. That was a long time ago. I know, but do you remember if he slept in my room? She didn't answer right away. I could hear her take a breath, the kind people take when they're deciding between truth and peace. You were already asleep. We didn't want to move you. He said he'd just stay on the couch, but you know how small the house was. So he did. It was one night. He was in my bed. Silence again. You were fine the next day. I stared out the window. The same tree still stood in our old yard, the one I used to climb before I was told to be careful. Before I learned how to make myself smaller, Mom, do you really not remember what I told you after? I remember you had bad dreams sometimes. I told you I thought someone was in the room. You were always sensitive. And there it was. Not denial, not confession. A reframe. A story gently tilted until it fit the version she could live with. I didn't cry. I just nodded to myself as if she'd confirmed everything I needed to know by trying not to say anything at all. So you didn't think to ask him? Ask him what? Her tone turned sharp defensive but measured. If he'd done something, if I was safe. You were safe. Nothing happened. But you didn't know that. I would have known. She said it like a prayer, like a shield. Like someone who had survived her own quiet war and learned knowing ruins everything. We ended the call soon after. She said she loved me. I said you too. But what I meant was, I see you now. And I finally see me. I texted my cousin to see if the house was still in the family. It was. Uncle Bill had inherited it after Grandma passed. He used it for storage, mostly. Said I could swing by if I needed something. He didn't ask why, just said. The keys still under the gnome. Somehow I knew it would be. The drive there was quiet. Harper stayed with a neighbor. I didn't tell her where I was going. Some things you face alone, not out of secrecy, out of respect for what needs to be reclaimed in silence. The house looked smaller. Of course it did. But it also looked the same, like it had been paused, not abandoned. Same beige siding. Same rusted swing set out back, same screen door that never closed all the way. And when I stepped inside, the air remembered. It smelled like old pine cleaner and boiled cabbage, faint familiar and deeply wrong. The hallway creaked under my weight. My room was still there. Same door, same knob. Same scratch marks from where I'd once taped up posters of ballerinas and dolphins. I pushed it open. The bed was made. The bedding different, but the frame was the same. Dark wood, slightly warped, the left leg still wobbling. I sat down on the edge. It dipped under me in the same way, like nothing had changed. I looked at the corner where the nightlight used to glow, at the floor vent where I'd whisper secrets to myself, at the closet door still slightly crooked. And I realized I didn't need anyone to confirm what happened here, because the body remembers. The air remembers. And sometimes, silence itself is the witness. I stood up, walked around the room once. Then I did something I hadn't done since I was 8. I lay down, not to sleep, to look at the ceiling, to feel the angle, the echo, the way the walls leaned in. It was exactly as I remembered, which meant I hadn't made it up. I left the house without taking anything, except peace, the kind that comes not from forgetting, but from finally choosing not to doubt yourself anymore. She asked again that night. We were folding laundry together on the living room floor, a rhythm we'd created to make chores feel like games. "Mommy, why was Uncle in your bed?" Her voice was casual, but her hands slowed and her eyes didn't look up. She already sensed there was more. Children always do. I set the shirt down in my lap, took a breath. Not the kind before confession, the kind before carefully building a bridge across something sharp. Sometimes when I was little like you, people didn't always do what was right, and grown-ups didn't always stop them. Not because they didn't care, but because they were afraid to see it. Was he bad? She asked it the way kids ask about lightning. Not if it's real, but how close it can get before it touches them. He made choices that weren't okay, and they made me feel small and confused, and I didn't understand how to say it at the time. Did he hurt you? I looked her straight in the eyes. He scared me. He confused me. And now that I'm older, I know that was wrong. She nodded. Didn't cry, didn't ask more. Just kept folding, like her little hands were helping put pieces of me back together one sock at a time. Later that night, after she'd gone to bed, I stood in the doorway of her room, watched the slow rise and fall of her breath, and I knew one day she'll want to know more. One day she'll ask with the language of a teenager or of a woman who's seen enough to recognize the shape of silence. And when that day comes, I'll tell her all of it. But not tonight. Tonight I've already told her what matters most. That her body is hers, that her voice is truth, and that if something doesn't feel right, she never has to wait 20 years to believe herself. It started with his Facebook. The profile picture hadn't changed in years, him and his dog both looking into the distance like they were in an ad for backyard grills. He still posted, not often, but enough, quotes about kindness, photos of homemade chili, comments under every single family birthday. "So proud of you, kiddo. Uncle Paul loves ya." It all looked normal. Too normal. But normal is a costume. And I'd learned how well predators wear it. I scrolled further back. His friends list was open. I recognized some names, distant cousins, old neighbors, someone I remembered crying at church once. Then I found her. Lexi, no last name needed. She was 2 years younger than me, lived across the street back then. Her posts were private, but her profile banner said everything. Survivor, advocate, believer. Silence is a system, we break it. My heart paused. I clicked through the pages she'd liked. One stood out, children remember even when adults don't. I didn't message her, not yet, but I bookmarked the page. Not out of fear, out of respect. Because I knew the timeline we walk as survivors is our own. Some of us speak loud. Some never speak at all. And some find someone else's truth and finally feel less alone. Next, I searched his name on Google, then Reddit, then the kind of forums people don't talk about unless they have a reason to look. There were no reports, no articles, but there were whispers, vague posts from anonymous accounts, mentions of a family member who made things uncomfortable, always in lowercase, always doubted by the thread. No names, no proof, just fragments, like smoke in a locked room. I leaned back in my chair, felt the weight of what I now understood. He was careful, and he wasn't new at this. But I was careful now too, and I was no longer 8. And this time, I was not the only one watching. The call came at 3:42 p.m. I was finishing emails on the couch. Dinner was thawing. It was a Thursday, quiet safe. The number on the screen was the front office at Harper's school. I answered immediately. "Hi, Ms. Emery. We just had a visitor come by asking for Harper. Said he was her great uncle. He didn't try to sign her out, just said he wanted to drop something off for her." My blood went cold. What was his name? Paul Henley. Do you know him? I closed my eyes. Yes, I said, I know exactly who he is. I was there in 7 minutes. Didn't brush my hair, didn't check my makeup. Just Key's wallet phone. And a heat in my chest that felt nothing like panic. It felt like precision. Like every nerve in my body had finally pointed in the same direction. He was gone by the time I arrived. Left a small bag of candy with a folded birthday card. Harper's birthday was still 2 months away. The card wasn't signed, just said, "To my favorite girl, always thinking of you." The front desk assistant handed it to me with a tight smile. He said he's family. We didn't know. You do now. I looked her dead in the eye, and he is never allowed on this campus again. That night, I sat Harper down. held the unopened bag of candy in one hand, the card in the other. "Did Uncle Paul say anything to you?" Her eyes widened. "No, was he here? He left these, he didn't talk to you." "No." She looked confused, nervous. "Did I do something wrong?" "Absolutely not." I held her face in both hands. "You did everything right. You're safe and no one gets to show up without my permission." She nodded slowly. Then she said, "But he knew where I go to school." And that's when my stomach truly dropped. Because she was right. He knew, which meant someone told him, or he watched, or he looked it up. And I realized it wasn't over. Not yet. I walked into the police station with a folder under my arm, not because I expected them to act, but because I needed a record that couldn't be erased. Inside the folder, the Polaroid Harper took, a timeline of events, names, a copy of the note he left, a screenshot of his social media comment from 3 years ago under a photo of Harper where he wrote, "Sweet girl reminds me of someone I knew once." They wouldn't see what I saw, but that didn't matter anymore. I wasn't here to convince. I was here to document. The officer at the desk asked what I needed. I said, "I'd like to file a report. It may not qualify as a crime yet, but it's a pattern. A repeated boundary violation from a known individual toward my child." He blinked, not mockingly, just unprepared. "And this is a family member." "Yes, which is why people usually wait until it's too late." I was calm. I didn't cry, didn't shake, didn't try to make it sound worse or softer than it was. I spoke like someone who had finally learned clarity is the only armor that lasts. He took my statement, made copies of everything, said someone would follow up maybe. But that wasn't the point. I had spoken. And this time, the silence would not be blank, it would be on file. I walked out of that station not feeling safe, but feeling named. And that mattered, because every system built to protect children often waits until there's no child left to protect. But my child was still here, and I wasn't waiting anymore. Harper sleeps deeper now. There was a time she tossed and turned, small limbs fighting invisible things. But lately, she's been still, even in her dreams. I don't think that's coincidence. I never told her every detail. Not because I couldn't, because she didn't need them, because her safety didn't require her to carry the story. Only to know it happened, and it wasn't her fault. And I believed her before she even knew what belief meant. One night, while brushing her hair, she asked, "Why do people lie about being good?" I paused. Because it's easier than admitting they did something wrong. She looked in the mirror, met my eyes. But we don't lie. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, a quiet contract between us. "No," I said, "we don't." She knows her body is hers. Her voice is hers. Her memories are not too messy to be taken seriously. She knows secrets whispered in the dark don't get to decide who she becomes. And most of all, she knows that if the world ever asks her to prove her pain, she has someone who already believes her. I wasn't given that, but I gave it to her. And that's the end of the story I needed as a child. Because the truest revenge is not survival, it's legacy. And mine begins with her never having to doubt herself the way I once did.